Welcome to Charles Dickens' A Brain on Fire, a series that digs deep into the life and works of one of the greatest novelists of all time. Hi everyone, welcome to a new series of Charles Dickens' A Brain on Fire. I'm thrilled to be kicking off our latest run of episodes with a deep dive into the Mystery of Edwin Drood, Dickens' last and unfinished novel. Joining us to talk about this extraordinary book is the inimitable Dr. Pete Orford, who is a lecturer in English literature and course director for the MA Research in Charles Dickens at the University of Buckingham. Pete has written extensively on Shakespeare, Dickens, but also Terry Pratchet, Philip Pulman and JK Rowling. He has made contributions to the Oxford Handbook and Blackwell companion to Charles Dickens, and he is currently editing Pictures from Italy for Oxford University Press. Pete is also the author of Edwin Drood, Charles Dickens' unfinished novel and our endless attempts to end it, which means, following swiftly on the back of this episode, he will be joining us again to talk about all the what-ifs and conspiracy theories that have sprung up in trying to solve the unanswered questions of what was Dickens going to write next at the point where this novel stops. But right now, in this first part, our focus is on the text that exists. But before we invite Pete in, I just want to introduce some of the characters or suspects that are pulled into the seemingly respectful orbit of Cloisterham Cathedral. First of all, there's John Jasper, a dark-haired young choirmaster and uncle to Edwin, despite being hardly much older than his nephew. Princess Puffer, the mysterious woman who stirs the opium for her customers. The Reverend Crisparkle, a cheerful, kind, good-natured bachelor who loves to rise early and pitch himself into the deep running waters of the surrounding country. The twins, Neville and Helena Landless, with their dark complexions, lately arrived from Ceylon, and must somehow find a way to be accepted by the local inhabitants. Rosa Budd, orphan and pet pupil of the nun's house. At first she is wonderfully pretty, childish and whimsical, but with depths to her that are unseen by the portrait her fiancé, the highly privileged and insouciant Edwin Drood, paints of her. Reading extracts from the novel today is the wonderful actress Carly Spear. And now, I think it's time to invite Pete into the room. Pete, hello and welcome to Charles Dickens' A Brain on Fire. I'm so thrilled to have you here.
Thank you, Dominic. It's great to be here too.
And, oh gosh, we're looking at the Mystery of Edwin Drood, which I have to say, I don't know where to begin. For the shortest book, there's so much to talk about, isn't there? So that we're actually going to split this episode into two parts.
Yep.
Which the first I've ever done. So, where to start? I mean, what do you think? Where should we kick off?
I mean, first of all, I'm really glad we are doing it in two parts because one of my biggest issues with Edwin Drood is how we always focus on what has not been written rather than what has been written, and obviously we'll come to that next time and look at all the theories and solutions, but so much focus on that means we don't pay enough attention to what's actually there in front of us. Dickens' last work, what he's written for us as well. And the thing is, this is a good story. Had it been if only it been finished, it would be a good story. There's some great characters here, some great themes, and Dickens doing some really interesting stuff. So thank you, first of all, for letting us talk about this first half in its entirety, because I think it's really important we do. I think we need more of this. There's been a real tendency. I mean, after all the flurry of solutions, there was a time when people thought we've solved it now, therefore Drood is done. No more to talk about. That's it, done. Oh, you got people talking about Our Mutual Friend as being Dickens' last complete novel, and therefore the one to focus on as well. So Drood got kind of sidelined for a long time as well, because it is incomplete and therefore feels like only half a work, half a kind of experience too. But what is there? Some great stuff there. So let's delve in. Let's get into Drood and what's going on there as well.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, no, I'm very happy to think of Drood as a kind of incomplete whole in itself. And I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but I had to stop, in preparation for this first part, I had to stop reading your book, which is all about the potential outcomes and solutions and theories and everything. And I thought, oh, no, I've got to get back to just the source and not get ahead of myself and get too excited. Because it is fun as well, isn't it? You can see why people go down all these conspiracy rabbit holes, because you can't help it. It's so intriguing. I thought, just to start with, this is nearly a question for you, in a sense, but I wondered whether it would be worth just setting the scene about what Cloisterham is, its presence and its effect on its inhabitants.
Yeah, Cloisterham really has its own characteristic. Now, we know, everyone knows, it's a very well known open secret that it's based on Rochester, where Dickens lived at the time. So we know this as a location for it, as its original inspiration. Okay, and you go to Rochester now, and they've got all the signs up saying this is where the Topes lived. You're like, they weren't real people, but So there is a real temptation to go to Rochester and walk around and see John Jasper's gatehouse and see the nun's house and walk the path. Which again helps a lot of the theories later on, trying to work out who was where on what night and how. But equally, it is a fictional place. So yes, Rochester inspires it, but Dickens then goes, well, what can I do with this town? What can I make of it? So the very name Cloisterham, you immediately got the cathedral front and center there in the word cloister, but also claustrophobic, closed in, entrapped. And what I find fascinating with Cloisterham is, in theory, it is the traditional safe space. Yeah, it's an old town. It's a small town. But you look at the book, and all the danger, all the threat is in Cloisterham. And London of all places, is the place of safety and sanctuary that people escape to. So it flips the narrative, where usually you have your nice, safe village and you go to the big city, like an Oliver Twist, or David Copperfield, and that's where the danger is. Suddenly, London is the safe space, and this old, backward-looking, over-nostalgic town becomes stifling. And a place where you are always being watched. And on the one hand, it shows that community for those who've always lived there. But for your landless twins, or even for Datchery, you come in there as a newcomer and you feel out of place and excluded as well. And it's really interesting that Dickens would use Rochester for this. Now, this is not a part of Rochester's a great place. I love Rochester. I don't think Dickens is attacking Rochester at all. I'm not saying that whatsoever. But what he's bringing out there really is this idea of going back home. He starts Pickwick Papers in Rochester. He goes back to it for Edwin Drood. And in his own lifetime, he's just done the whole reading tours. He's been around the UK and America. And now, because of ill health, he's back in Gad's Hill by Rochester. And again, you get a sense of stifling. Like, well, I've just traveled the world and I'm back in Rochester. I'm back home again. And you can't go home. And there's this really beautiful passage in the chapter where Edwin goes missing, in fact, when shall these two meet again? And it starts with Christmas Eve in Cloisterham. And it describes Christmas Eve in Cloisterham. And this idea of all these old faces coming back to see the town again and wonder how shrunk it is.
Christmas Eve in Cloisterham. A few strange faces in the streets. A few other faces, half strange and half familiar. Once the faces of Cloisterham children, now the faces of men and women who come back from the outer world at long intervals to find the city wonderfully shrunken in size, as if it had not washed by any means well in the meanwhile. To these, the striking of the cathedral clock and the cawing of the rooks from the cathedral tower are like voices of their nursery time.
And it is that experience we all have of going home at Christmas time and going, oh, this is where I grew up, but actually it feels smaller now. It's not what it was. I've changed. And that sense of trapped, stuck, unable to really fulfill what you want to, having seen a wider world and come back again now and feeling unfulfilled. And so it is also that place of a smaller community, whereas London offers anonymity, the idea of being able to, escape to go into the streets and not be known by your neighbor. In Cloisterham, everyone knows who you are. And this is where you go into Agatha Christie territory with Miss Marple, because the small village is where all the best murders happen, because everyone is watching, everyone has each other's secrets as well. Cloisterham is a perfect place for this kind of dark deed to happen.
Yeah. that Christmas Eve in Cloisterham passage that you mentioned, it has that phrase with people talking about the people saying the circle of their lives was nearly traced and the beginning and the end were drawing close together. So that full circle thing that you're talking about is so interesting. And then, of course, and I'm trying to keep it at the door, Pete, I really am. But then, of course, you know that Dickens is going to die with hindsight, don't you? So you're thinking on one level, is he feeling that himself? Perhaps. I suppose maybe with the ill health, he would at least have a sense of his limits and mortality, wouldn't he? Even if he didn't imagine he would not be able to finish the book.
Yeah. So two things have happened here of importance. One, of course, is the Staplehurst crash, which happens in 1865. So he's had that brush with death. Yeah. To compare it to an earlier event, which is the death of Mary Hogarth. When Mary Hogarth dies, he writes about it to all his friends, like, oh, it's such a tragedy. Oh, I'm so sad as well. And there is, for all of his sadness, a performative nature to it. He's kind of relishing the drama there. With Staplehurst, you don't get quite that same sense of wallowing. He's genuinely shaken by it. I mean, his signature on the letter he writes about it is actually shaking because he's in shock as well. So Staplehurst has an effect because it is that brush with death. Like, God, I was close then, and I'm not immortal. And then the reading tours, he has ill health. He's told to stop for ill health. So again, he is starting to confront the idea that he's not going to live forever. Now, that doesn't mean he knows he's going to die immediately, but it means he is thinking about, I'm not a young man anymore. And so with our mutual friend and Edwin Drood, for the first time, he has a clause in his publishing contract about what happens if he dies before completion for both of those two texts. Yeah. So if I die, then, Forster's got the manuscripts, or this goes here, and this is where the money goes to or return to if I've not completed this work in time. So that kind of thinking ahead too, I'm signing a contract here, but if I don't complete, then this is what will happen with the monies and so forth too. Yeah. But that's for both his last two works, not just Edwin Drood. So there is that awareness. Absolutely.
Yes. I mean, I don't know of any other story that's so centered around tombs and vaults and ancient, I tried to do a kind of word count here, but I think the word cathedral, for example, appears 72 times. So the cathedral Cloisterham Cathedral is an enormous presence throughout. And it's sometimes a warm presence and sometimes it's an old, mouldering, threatening kind of presence as well, isn't it?
Yeah. One of the more convincing discussions I've seen about Edwin Drood is the way in which it is focusing on the church, in the way that, you have the Circumlocution Office and you have attacking on money, in other words, in Dorrit as well, you have attacks on politics. This does seem to be centering on the church as an area for discussion. Now, Dickens, as we know, was Christian, but he was wary of the establishment. He was wary of the established church. And so something like a cathedral is a mixed environment for Dickens. On the one hand, he's going to be very much in favor of the fundamental message, but he is wary of all the hierarchy, all the pomp around it as well. So it's entirely like Dickens to use this as an opportunity to talk about the hypocrisy within it, because you have got good characters. Reverend Crisparkle is a good Christian man, okay? But John Jasper is not. Okay, so he's showing the two sides there, that it's not a given fact. And he really pulls on this idea of the choir master being a villain, or at least a troubled man as well. And so don't just trust on faith. Well, he's a Christian man, therefore he's a good man. Question everything as well.
That's so interesting that as we spin the character wheel, you brought in already Jasper, and that first opening paragraph of the novel is through Jasper's eyes, isn't it? Even though it's not 100% first person. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's in an opioid haze.
An ancient English cathedral tower? How can the ancient English cathedral tower be here? The well-known, massive grey square tower of its old cathedral. How can that be here? There is no spike of rusty iron in the air between the eye and it from any point of the real prospect. What is the spike that intervenes? And who has set it up? Maybe it is set up by the Sultan's orders for the impaling of a horde of Turkish robbers one by one. Some vague period of drowsy laughter must be devoted to the consideration of this possibility.
I just think that's extraordinary, that question about how can that cathedral be here? And there it is.
And there's so much on that opening paragraph, because what you've got there is, the reader has no idea where you are. It's the first paragraph of the story, you don't know what's happening. So when you get this line, an ancient cathedral tower, how can it be here? It perfectly captures that sense of waking up and that kind of that blurry, where am I, what's going on as well, you know. But in that paragraph, you get references to Cathedral Town. You get eventually references to London, but also all these exotic references to Arabian Nights and this far off Orientalism excitement there as well, which really is a key theme throughout the story. We have Egypt coming up as well. We're going to have opium, obviously. We have the landless twins coming from Ceylon. So as an opening paragraph, it really does tick all the boxes of this is where we are, but actually a lot's going on here. So yes, we're in a cathedral town, but you're going to get London. You're going to get, you know, the Orient coming in here as well. It's all feeding into this kind of melting pot of different cultures going on too.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? Because it's a kind of serene, calm opening in one sense, but then very quickly you've got images of Turkish robbers being impaled on the cathedral spike. You know, it's incredibly violent. And then when you start to learn more about John Jasper, it starts to make sense. But I'm going to confess something to you right now.
Go on.
Which is that I read that first chapter, and bearing in mind I hadn't read Edwin Drood at all up to this point. I read that first chapter and somehow managed to miss that the central character was Jasper, which meant that it took me quite a few chapters to suddenly go, oh God, that was him in the opium den, which changed my entire reading, which made it more difficult because Dickens doesn't waste too much time letting us know that he's, you know, a troubled character at the very least, at the very best.
Yeah.
But yeah, there you go.
Yeah, this is a great Dickens opening in that tradition of how do I start this in a way that's really puts the reader on edge, partly. What's going on? How do I follow this too? Immediately tapping into some key themes of the whole story and that sense of don't trust what you see here. Don't take anything for granted as well. For a mystery story, especially going through here, you know, don't take everything on faith as you go through here.
Yes.
And it's fascinating to see the idea of having this character who is dealing with some sort of drug addiction as well and really exploring the impact on his mind as well. And what we'll never know, because again, it's not finished, is how much we are supposed to blame the opium as a cause of what's happening to Jasper or as a side effect of his own psyche as well. He's taken this opium, he's having these visions of what he might do. In some ways, it's an easy way of marking him out as a troubled mind or even a villainous mind as well. And yet at the same time, you know, you've got this sort of remarkable depiction of those scenes in the opium den and the other characters too, and this depravity. And it's not glamorous, that's for sure. It's very accurate, I suppose. I mean, Dickens did do these night walks. He would go see these kind of scenes himself. So this is not unfamiliar territory to him, but it would be to his readers who would be shocked by this kind of depiction, you know, and it is going to the slums and showing this as well. And so as much as it's kind of an easy marker to show that Jasper is a troubled character, nor is it completely condemning either as well. You know, it's still got that ambiguity of here is a place where this is depravity, but what do we do about this? You know, and it's presenting it as is for you to make your own mind up there too.
When it comes to Jasper, I'm fascinated by him because I feel like the other 6 installments, if they'd been written, would have given us so much more. But we've talked about Macbeth, haven't we, in the run-up to this and how often it's referenced in this. And obviously the tragedy of that is Macbeth is this great guy that falls, whereas Jasper doesn't seem to have fallen very far from from the first time we see him. Do you see what I mean? He's already in that kind of bad place.
This is where an ending would be helpful because what is not clear here is how tormented is Jasper? How much is it affectation? You know, is he as tormented as he seems? And for me personally, I think he is. I mean, there's enough talk before this where you see the struggle he's going through, the unhappiness too. He's not somebody who is enjoying the situation he's in, as simple as that, which is why he is Macbeth, you know, rather than Richard III. You know, he's not gleefully going through and making asides to the reader and making jokes about it. He is grappling with the psychological cost of his own, well, we can't say for certain. I'm fairly certain he's the guy who kills Edwin Drood. Let's as a spoiler. I'm fairly certain, you know. And we'll come back to that perhaps in a moment, but definitely somebody who's in love with his nephew's, fiance as well, you know. So I say he's not a happy character. So for whatever his faults are, he has at least enough moral awareness to know there is a fault and to be haunted by that too. So I think he is a nuanced character.
Yes, it's interesting because I think what we're missing perhaps is the guilt when his conscience catches him properly. In Martin Chuzzlewit, is it Jonas? Some of the fantastic sections there about his guilt at having murdered Montague.
Yeah, Montague Tigg, that's right, yeah.
Really unprepared to bring in these references, sorry. Thank you for helping.
You're doing very well, yeah.
But, and I think we're possibly missing that. That would have been really interesting. But
I mean, even Bill Sikes, murders Nancy, but you have then the aftermath as well, and the kind of the awkwardness, the haunting of him with his dog as well. So, I mean, Dickens does do that. And, I mean, again, inevitably today we're going to talk about the ending to some extent. We won't get too involved in that, but Forster's idea of what Dickens says to him is that the ending is meant to be magnificent, unlike anything done before. The condemned man in his cell confessing. My idea is that it would almost be the antithesis to the Sidney Carton monologue at the end of Tale of Two Cities, like the villain's monologue, effectively. But that would be potential for either the guilt that we're talking about, or worse, the lack of guilt and the almost kind of pride or open, frank acknowledgement of what's happened as well. But the ending would have crowned all. That's the annoying thing. It's not as if this is an unfinished story, but actually it's one where the ending really would have been a killer ending to it as well.
One of the things you were saying about how much is Jasper responsible for his actions, how much is it his fault, or how much is it the opium? And I've got to admit here, my brain is so excited at the possibility of pouring in Macbeth references that I'm looking for them where they aren't there. And, so just to warn you, but the Princess Puffer character, the lady who deals the opium, she has so much of the weird sisters about her, doesn't she?
She really does.
And Fortune. Yeah. And it's just so interesting, isn't it? The idea that the spell that she possibly casts on him, although it seems that actually she's wanting to, bring him down and punish him.
I think you're right. I think actually seeing her as a witch is fantastic. I've not thought that before. That's a really interesting idea because she is morally ambiguous. She's not a villain, but she's not a hero either. So she is the person who is giving Jasper the drugs, resents him for his attitude towards her, and then so seeks revenge. And it's not justice. She just wants to, cause pain to a guy that she feels has slighted her in some way as well. But again, if you want to do the Macbeth thing, then if the witch gives Macbeth a vision of the future, then Princess Puffer gives the opium and Jasper has these fantasies, visions of what might be as well. Now, just like Macbeth, you can argue that comes from within and his own ambitions first, but nonetheless, the opium den gives him that place where he can see it realized and then wants to make it real as well. So there's definitely a sort of a teasing there. And I'd say either you got the opium or you got the idea of a man with severe mental issues as well. And one popular theory is that you may have a case here of split personality. That's another idea too. So again, that distancing as well. That he is, an ill man and therefore not in control. The age-old thing of using insanity as a plea cause for murder here is a potential defense here for Jasper. Is he truly in control of his own actions, or is it beyond him too?
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. And I think, the moment that made me think of Princess Puffer as a weird sister was actually in the chapter titled When Shall These Three Meet Again? Obviously a play on When Shall We Three Meet Again, where Edwin meets her in the street. And all of that information she gives him about his name and it being a dangerous name, and that is purely Shakespearean, isn't it? That's
hugely witch-like. Yeah. So Edwin's not a safe name to have, or Ned's not a safe name to have as well. So she, and on the one hand, again, she's just relaying what she's heard in the opium den. She's heard Jasper saying the name Ned and going, well, that's not a safe name. But equally, you're right, it has this almost supernatural feel of her predicting the future and warning him. And that idea of fate, that it's the name that makes him unsafe as well. He's fated to be unsafe here too. So Macbeth is running through this whole book, and we've said elsewhere, Dickens is obviously a huge fan of Shakespeare and uses King Lear a lot, but this is very much inspired by Macbeth. The fact that the night that Edwin goes missing is this dark and stormy night, it's it's Paul Williton, but also it's very much it's Macbeth, and that's what makes Jasper so interesting, that he's not a villain. He's an anti-hero, isn't he? He's somebody that you are following through as the main character, but you don't like him, or you're worried about him as well. It's like Columbo. The real sensation is not who done it, but waiting to see how the other characters find out, begging for the characters to find out, when are you going to catch up? I've spotted it. Why can't you? And waiting to see the villain reveal themselves and get caught. And to my mind, Edwin Drood is that kind of story where it's very clear from the beginning, John Jasper is a dangerous character. John Jasper is one to watch. And Dickens does this wonderfully arch, innocent way of writing Jasper, where he just happens to provide wine for Edwin and Neville, and just happens to spend a long time preparing it. And they just happen to get more aggressive after drinking the wine. And he just happens to go and drug Durdles later. And this very innocent narration where, as a reader, you're going, no, that's not innocent, and you can see the inference there. That's very deliberate. And so, to my mind, I have no doubt that you're meant to suspect Jasper the whole way through.
Yeah.
And not that to be a twist, but to go, it is him. And I'm just waiting to see everyone else catch up with it as well.
Yes, I don't feel like it is a twist either. But I do wonder, as I was falling down the Macbeth rabbit hole, whether or not Dickens is deliberately tricking me. Because, of course, we don't actually know, really, if Edwin has been murdered, do we? There's no body, at least. A watch and a pin shows up, doesn't it, in the weir later on.
That's correct, yeah.
But you mentioned Bill Sikes a moment ago, and of course we always know he's dangerous. I mean, he's very nearly one-dimensional, isn't he, in that way? But Jasper's so fascinating, isn't he? Because he's a choir master, isn't he? And he's a music teacher and very respectable on the outside. And most people think he is incredibly respectable. And then he has the most extraordinary flashes of violence and temper, doesn't he? That, funny enough, even when you know that about him, is still quite shocking when you read it. I think one moment that really gets me is that strange baby devil, as he calls him, character, deputy, who just goes around throwing stones at people and animals all the time. And it's just such a weird thing, just that for a moment. But the way he grabs him by the throat and starts choking him.
Yeah.
A rapid fire of stones rattles at the cathedral wall, and the hideous small boy is beheld opposite, dancing in the moonlight. "What? Is that baby devil on the watch there?" cries Jasper in a fury, so quickly roused and so violent that he seems an older devil himself. "I shall shed the blood of that impish wretch. I know I shall do it." Regardless of the fire, though it hits him more than once, he rushes at Deputy. He is no sooner taken by the throat than he curls up his legs, forces his assailant to hang him, as it were, and gurgles in his throat, and screws his body and twists, as already undergoing the first agonies of strangulation.
And again, you said how it's very modern. What I find modern about this is the way that Jasper is somebody who is threatening, but not in a way that could be charged. He is, especially the way he treats Rosa, he is exactly that kind of man that, the Me Too movement is warning about. So there's nothing you can say about Jasper that is, oh, he did this, officer, arrest him. But Rosa immediately feels threatened by his presence, and the way that he looks at her, the way that he holds his gaze upon her, he's constantly intruding and imposing upon her, but in this way that no one could possibly say he's done something wrong. And yet he's doing everything wrong. And so later on, when he then has his outburst with her by the sundial, it's confirming what we know about him really as well.
This time he does not touch her. But his face looks so wicked and menacing as he stands leaning against the sundial setting, as it were his black mark upon the very face of day, that her flight is arrested by horror as she looks at him. "I do not forget how many windows command a view of us," he says, glancing towards them. "I will not touch you again. I will come no nearer to you than I am. Sit down, and there will be no mighty wonder in your music masters leaning idly against a pedestal and speaking with you. Sit down, my beloved."
That's a remarkably modern way of presenting the heroine's plight of this villain who's not twirling his mustache, and laughing demonically, but it's actually just a very quiet, threatening presence in plain sight. And everyone goes, "Oh, he's a nice guy. Oh, you're misunderstanding him. He's perfectly lovely." And she's like, "No, he's not. I can't explain it, but he's not."
Yes.
And again, the reader sees it, and we're with Rosa, but it's that horror of seeing everyone else not acknowledge it.
Yeah, absolutely. But did you, when you read it for the first time, it must be quite hard possibly for you to remember your first occasion of reading it after all the times you've gone through it. Because early on I wondered whether Rosa was potentially in love with Jasper, and that her awkward feeling and her embarrassment and a sense of shame came from actually the fact that, he was accompanying her while she was singing and she couldn't look at him, whether it was that. And because I already know by that point that she's not in love with Edwin. But then, of course, you really see that, of course, no, this is, as you're saying, we're in Me Too territory here with what he's doing.
I mean, do I remember the first time I read this book? It's been so long. It's been so long.
For me, it was only 2 weeks ago, so I'm sort of fresh in mind.
I mean, obviously, eventually you get her meeting Tata, and that's very clearly the romantic lead for her, and that's much more clear and much more direct there. So with her on first reading of those early installments, would you then think there's a potential there? It's an intriguing idea. It's something that others have picked up on in subsequent completions where they think that maybe there is a dark attraction there as well.
I was thinking the Mill on the Floss, actually, it reminded me of, which is why I don't know what it was, something about the choices there, that fatal attraction that you're talking about.
And even within Dickens, you've got Edith Granger and Carker and Dombey and Son. Now, again, that is where Edith ultimately does not like him, but she's warning Dombey the whole time. Can you not see this man is doing this? He's trying to seduce me. Could you not understand what's occurring there? Or again, Bradley Headstone in Our Mutual Friend. But whether you could see that as a dark attraction, it's intriguing. But I think ultimately, as it goes on, we find out it's not that.
Yeah, I do dispense with that as I go through it, definitely. But early on, it was just in those first impressions, I wondered whether that was intentional. Bless Rosa's heart, she makes efforts to protect Edwin from the truth about Jasper, because she doesn't want to damage Jasper and Edwin's eyes. But of course, if he is murdered by Jasper, that ironically, that need to protect him could be the cause of his death in some ways.
It could be. It's strange. Edwin's a strange character, and again, it's odd that he's the title character because he really is a side character and all this well, and he is somebody who people are acting around him. He doesn't really do much himself. Rosa protects him. Jasper has these machinations against him as well. He's a rival to Neville later on. But Edwin is not really a proactive character in the story. He's somebody that things happen to him.
He's not a very likable character either in places at the start. The way he treats Neville is terrible, isn't it? It feels they've always been brought together to mend their argument by Chris Sparkle, and you think, well, it's very much a one-sided argument, especially to a modern reader, I think.
Absolutely. And I mean, you said about Rosa protecting him. I mean, he is very much spoiled and babied by everyone. And Mrs. Tope says this to Jasper, that, you're too kind to him. You're too good to him. You give him too much. And so there is that idea of, in a way, like a lot of murder mystery stories, you do kind of see why the victim becomes the victim. You can see why it occurs. Now, Edwin is not, he's not a villain, but you can start to sympathize with Jasper's frustration of why does this guy get the girl and not me as well? This guy who gets everything. I mean, it's also a testing point for Jasper because this is the boy that he has spoiled himself. But here's this one thing, goes, no, I can't give you this. I don't want you to have this as well. Which is massively demeaning because obviously Rosa gets no say at this. She's treated as an object. But for Jasper, that idea of I can't stand by and let you have this girl here is a remarkable test of his devotion to his own nephew as well.
Yeah. But just when Neville is trying to make polite conversation very early on, and just that lazy arrogance of everyone saying, "Oh, I'm off to wake up Egypt a little bit," that kind of
so privileged,
condescension. And Neville's right. Neville says that thing to him about it would have been better if you'd known some hardships in your life. You would be wise. You'd be kinder. You'd be all these things.
Absolutely.
When Neville speaks, his speech is also thick and indistinct. "It might have been better for Mr. Drood to have known some hardships," he says defiantly.
"Pray," retorts Edwin, "why might it have been better for Mr. Drood to have known some hardships?"
Because they might have made him more sensible, says Neville, of good fortune that is not by any means necessarily the result of his own merits.
Have you known hardships, may I ask? Says Edwin Drood, sitting upright.
I have.
And what have they made you sensible of?
I have told you once before tonight.
You have done nothing of the sort.
I tell you I have.
Say it again.
I said that in the part of the world I come from, you would be called to account for it.
Only there? Cries Edwin Drood with a contemptuous laugh. A long way off, I believe.
Say here, then, rejoins the other, rising in a fury. Say anywhere. Your vanity is intolerable. Your conceit is beyond endurance. You talk as if you were some rare and precious prize instead of a common boaster. You are a common fellow, and a common boaster.
Pooh, says Edwin Drood. How should you know? You may know a black common fellow, or a black common boaster, when you see him, and no doubt you have a large acquaintance that way. But you are no judge of white men.
This insulting allusion to his dark skin infuriates Neville to that violent degree that he flings the dregs of his wine at Edwin Drood, and is in the act of flinging the goblet after it when his arm is caught in the nick of time by Jasper.
A word that kept jumping out as I was reading it, in some form, was stone or stony or flagstone, hearthstone, stones being thrown at people, but people themselves having stony expressions. There's this moment where Durdles is going up into the tower with Jasper and he strikes a light on the wall, and it's a line about that mysterious fire that lurks in everything, which I just thought was a very key quote for the whole book. So often you have these characters, especially Rosa actually, where you have these flashes, you have these looks that they give each other that shoot out like sparks and then they look away again, or they look down, or the wall comes down again. And I just thought there are so many moments where that happens.
She looks up at him with a swift, bright look. Next moment shakes her head, sighs, and looks down again.
To go back to the fire a second, obviously Helena's got this fire in her eyes, well, there's this tigerish fire in her eyes, there's passion there too. I mean, the stoniness, I suppose it comes back to that idea of the unsafe hometown in a way. There's this sense of lack of connect with your fellow human beings. If they do appear as stones, like, do you know who they are? Is there any real warmth in Cloisterham? Again, if you're an outsider, you're very much, faced with stony exteriors as well and not feeling quite so home there. It's the age of the town too. It's the feel of it being an old town, a ruined town as well. You've got the ruined castle there as well. So part of the stone is about foundations, age, but in terms of the characters, it is that sense of not seeing their true feelings expressed. You get pockets of warmth. You get Crisparkle and his mother, warmth there. You get Rosa and Helena knowing each other and opening up. You get Neville opening up to Crisparkle as well. That sort of release of like, I can now be honest with you. So there is a sense of guarding your initial thoughts and protecting yourself, which I think is where the stone idea comes in. Not revealing yourself, being emotionless almost as well.
But what I find so interesting is obviously Helena and Neville, having come from Sealand, being imposed on them is this idea of civilized society. You've come from a place where it's not civilized, and this is true civilized society. And yet, of course, they're the most open, the most honest. They admit their wrongs. They apologize. They try and do right, and they have real feeling. Whereas so many of the other characters would do better if they let go of some of the manners and politeness, so that they could actually really understand themselves and the people around them. And I mean, I think of the first scene between Edwin and Rosa, where they rehearsed this kind of scenario where they've both been engaged to somebody else.
Yeah.
And you get this brilliant wild coward kind of dialogue there that really torments them.
And this most sensible of creatures likes the idea of being carried off to Egypt, does she, Eddie?
Yes. She takes a sensible interest in triumphs of engineering skill, especially when they are to change the whole condition of an undeveloped country.
But don't she hate Arabs and Turks and fellahs and people?
Certainly not.
At least she must hate the pyramids. Come, Eddie.
Why should she be such a little, goose, as to hate the pyramids, Rosa?
Compared to later on when they break off their engagement.
Yeah, both at their best. And again, that is when they're actually finally honest with each other as well.
Eddie, let us be courageous. Let us change to brother and sister from this day forth.
Never be husband and wife.
Never. You are not truly happy in our engagement. I am not truly happy in it. Oh, I am so sorry. And there she broke into tears.
I am deeply sorry too, Rosa.
This pure young feeling, this gentle and forbearing feeling of each towards the other, brought with it its rewards in a softening light that seemed to shine on their position. The relations between them did not look wilful or capricious or a failure in such a light. They became elevated into something more self-denying, honourable, affectionate, and true.
But I'm glad you mentioned the Edwin Rosa bit, because this comes back to another bugbear of mine. And you mentioned it before about, seeing this as Dickens dies. Obviously, your listeners will know this as well, but it's worth stating again that all of Dickens's novels are published in installments, which is what makes this so interesting, because, whereas every author really is likely to be writing a story when they die. That's what writers do. So it's not unusual for Dickens to have an unfinished novel. What's unusual is people are already reading it before he dies, because it's in installments. So he publishes it first comes out in April of 1870, followed by May and June. Then he dies, and then July, August, September, the last 3 installments there. And what is fascinating is when you look at the reviews of the first installments, they are all saying about how funny it is, how comic it is, how it's classic Dickens again. It's just like Pickwick. It's a return to the good old days of the green covers, and it's Pickwick again. And Sapsy is another Pecksniff. And Sapsy is hilarious, the best character, and the scene of Rose and Edwin is humorous and lovely as well. After Dickens dies, almost immediately the reviews are saying, oh, it's very melancholy. And did you see the graveyard scene? And it's like Dickens knew. And that starts like that. Things like Edwin and Rosa, that whole scene is a funny scene. It's a comic scene. And it's Dickens doing, what Dickens does well. And that's something that frequently gets overlooked. When we look at Drood, we look at it as this dark tale, this mystery, this last tale. But there are funny bits in there too. The Billiken, the whole bit of the Billiken later on as well. When Rose moves to London and there's this demented landlady, showing them around the house and how awful it is as well. This battle axe of a character. There's some really funny moments in this book too. We don't talk about them enough.
No, it's so true, isn't it? Because I think I had that same thing. Somewhere in the back of my mind was the idea, or maybe Dickens is slowing down in this book. Maybe he's not at his peak of his powers. But no, those funny moments are fantastic. I love all of Sapsy. He's so enjoyable, isn't he?
The purest jackass in Cloisterham is Mr. Thomas Sapsy.
And his jingoism as well that Dickens attacks.
When the French come over, may we meet them at Dover.
This was a patriotic toast in Mr. Sapsy's infancy, and he is therefore fully convinced of it being appropriate to any subsequent era.
And at Jasper's house, where Jasper sings him lots of nationalistic kind of George III era songs.
And he's before he becomes mayor, he's an auctioneer, and he's this lovely line where if I've not been to foreign parts, they've been to me. It's like the world has come to me. And so this is empire. I've got all the world's riches coming to me as well, so I know them via the parts coming to me. He talks about the Eskimos, he talks about China as well. He's seen the things from them. He knows them enough. He's never been to those countries, but he feels like I've seen enough. Sapsy epitomizes the idea of the world will come to him. And we're back into privilege. We're back into the idea of, you need to go see the world, actually, and get a better understanding of the world beyond your own borders here, too. But yeah, it's comical. It's also horror as well, to see his complete lack of empathy. Between him and Honey Thunder, you've got a real lack of self-awareness of where they think they're the greatest character. They think they're the wisest, and think you're an absolute jackass.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, one of my favourite phrases for Sapsy is solemn idiot. I just think that's so great. But Honey Thunder as well. And that idea of, I think there's a line about his philanthropy is so close to animosity that you can't really tell the difference. But I think that's brilliant. And that whole sequence where Honey Thunder has the dinner.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? I loved that bit.
And he just talks the whole time. Everyone's like, oh, God, it's Honey Thunder again as well, you know.
And it's pure Pickwick, isn't it? Where they get rid of him. They send him home early. He ends up sitting in a carriage for half an hour before it leaves.
Yeah, just like, it's time for you to go. Off you go.
The gush of philanthropy that burst forth when the departure of Mr. Honeythunder began to impend must have been highly gratifying to the feelings of that distinguished man. His coffee was produced a full hour before he wanted it. Mr. Crisparkle sat with his watch in his hand, lest he should overstay his time. The four young people were unanimous in believing that the cathedral clock struck 3/4 when it actually struck but 1. Miss Twinkleton estimated the distance to the omnibus at 25 minutes' walk, when it was really 5. The affectionate kindness of the whole circle hustled him into his greatcoat and shoved him out into the moonlight, as if he were a fugitive traitor with whom they sympathised, and a troop of horse were at the back door. Mr. Crisparkle and his new charge, who took him to the omnibus, were so fervent in their apprehensions of his catching cold that they shut him up in it instantly and left him with still half an hour to spare.
Dickens is such a great writer for so many reasons, but one of just a moment like this where he's able to articulate this, where he talks about where Honey Thunder, in his oratorial style, picks a target round the table to vent at, and it's Crisparkle. And he vents at Crisparkle as if Crisparkle was the real villain of his story.
The dinner was a most doleful breakdown. The philanthropist deranged the symmetry of the table, blocked up the thoroughfare, and drove Mr. Tope, who assisted the parlour-maid, to the verge of distraction by passing plates and dishes on over his own head. Nobody could talk to anybody because he held forth to everybody at once, as if the company had no individual existence but were a meeting. He impounded the Reverend Mr. Septimus as an official personage to be addressed, or a kind of human peg to hang his oratorical hat on, and fell into the exasperating habit, common among such orators, of impersonating him as a wicked and weak opponent.
You will know that feeling when someone's telling you a story where they told somebody off and they start telling you off. You think, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. And it's horrific, isn't it? And I mean, between that and obviously then his later appearance when Crisparkle says, well, look, there's these twins that you gave to me for my protection, I just want you to know this. So it's like, I disown them, I don't know them, and exposes the hypocrisy of the guy as well. And it comes back to the idea of, Dickens attacking establishment here as well. That, Honey Thunder is the face of professional philanthropy, charity. He's a good Christian soul doing good things for people, and it's all just facade in his case. He doesn't mean it. He's just acting it. Crisparkle is your true Christian hero in this story, but Honey Thunder, like Jasper as well, it's hollow, it's fake. And so, as always with Dickens, you've got the comedy there, which then builds up to create the drama. It doesn't act in opposition. You're laughing at Honey Thunder to begin with, and then suddenly you're not laughing anymore. You're like, actually, this guy, this is too far. This is a terrible character as well. And Dickens gets that clash, that conflict very well of using comedy to make the drama hit all that bit harder as well later on.
Is it fair to say that at this late stage in his writing, he's able to pour more venom and scorn on these characters than he would have done back in 1836?
Absolutely. And this is, the age-old argument of Dickens that, he writes comic novels to begin with and then goes on to these more serious social, political novels in the second half of his career. Not that simple, but certainly something that a lot of his contemporaries picked up on. They said, go back to the comic stuff. All these more recent works, they're a bit overreaching yourself and not as good. The irony being that, in later generations, we've gone, the later stuff's really good stuff because it's so serious and political. But the reality is Dickens the whole way through his career. So in the early novels, you've got moments of serious social criticism. And in the later novels, like Drood, you've still got the comedy there as well. But you're right, there is that edge, there is that bite to it. So he'll mock Honey Thunder. Honey Thunder could be a character that Pickwick meets on his travels quite easily. He could be at the Mrs. Leo Hunter's party quite easily there and be right at home. And yet Dickens presents the character, laughs at the character, but then goes, do you see the damage the character is causing as well? So yes, we can laugh at him, but recognize also there are real Honey Thunders in the world as well, and correct that.
Yeah. Can I ask you a really scholarly question?
Oh, go on then.
Do you have a favourite moment in this book?
So scholarly.
You're glad you came on now.
Oh, I am. I think it has to be that chapter, When Shall These Three Meet Again? I think that is Dickens writing really well. The structure of it, the three-part structure of following, Jasper's Day, Neville's Day, Edwin's Day, that's fantastic. The opening of Christmas Eve in Cloisterham is some of my favorite writing in the book. I think that's superb the way he does that too. And of course, building towards this great finale of the key moment of the story, the disappearance of Edwin Drood. I think it's really well written, that chapter. And yeah, the Macbeth, images coming through there too. I think it's really Dickens at his peak in the story in particular. I really enjoy that chapter.
Yeah, no, I do. And for some reason, when I was reading it, the Poston Stair just keeps appearing, doesn't it? Ascending the Poston Stair. And you think, is there something more about this Poston Stair that we'll never know later on?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe this is for another episode, but I don't know.
What does it mean? And again, this is the danger of assuming that Cloisterham is Rochester without any change. Dickens changes things. He uses Rochester as inspiration, but he changes things. So if you go to the gatehouse, there aren't enough doors in the gatehouse compared to what Dickens says. There isn't a postern stair. There isn't another door for Datchery's house as well. So Dickens uses the location, but ultimately he's writing his work and he'll change it to suit what he wants there as well. So what does the postern stair mean? Is it maybe a mystery we'll never know there, perhaps too? I do definitely like the Honey Thunder dinner scene as well. I like those comic scenes too. I think we need more of those moments. And I love the Billiken. And I wish we could see more of her too. But equally, the opium den scenes, those marvelously evocative, ambiguous scenes there as well. And then Tartar and his fantastic beanstalk house, like Jack and the Beanstalk as well.
Yeah, he's wonderful, isn't he? And I feel like Dickens very, very quickly tells us that Rosa will be with Tartar in the end, that they will end up being together.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's going to work out for Neville, though, because up to that point, Neville seems perhaps, destined and the right guy for her.
You would think so, but no, Neville seems to be the doomed youth here as well. The melancholic youth who's not going to get the girl, Maybe it's the cynic heart of the story here too. It's funny because I started work on the book because of the endings, but actually I really like the book. I really like the story as it is. And trying to explain that to people, actually, it's really good. And yes, it's not ending, but what there is there is really enjoyable. And then some really great moments of writing on Dickens's part here too. Collins called it the melancholic labor of a worn out brain, but it's not. It's great,
That's coloured by what happens to Dickens, isn't it? I'm sure that is, isn't it? And how you feel emotionally towards it. And you start to think, it's tombstones all the time. But characters and poor animals are being pelted with stones, aren't they? Then these aren't stones that stay where they are. No, I don't see that now reading it. I expected to find that, actually. I wouldn't. But no.
I'll say it again. You're right. The knowing that Dickens died puts us in his last novel and at the end of a second half of writing, the comic novels and then later novels. I again want to contest that because when you look at this turning point Dickens' career, when he goes to Italy in the 1840s and he comes back and writes Dombey and Son, that's his big turning point. Great, okay. That's like a 1 year break away from writing he takes to have that turning point. After Our Mutual Friend, it's 5 years before he writes Edwin Drood. It's a 5 year break, going on tour, doing readings, and then he comes back and writes Edwin Drood. And we go, that's his last story. But for his readers, it was his latest story. It was the new Dickens. So my counter argument is, what if Dickens didn't die in 1870? Then this wouldn't be his last story. It'd be the first of a new third wave of Dickens's fiction, where he's doing something different, something new. And it does feel new. There's a lot of Dickens traits there, a lot of classic Dickens, but also the tone, the style, the structure It's going to be 12 monthly parts. He's never done 12 before. It's always been 20. Why now 12? What's going on with the structure as well? He's trying new things out with his last novel. And so I don't see it as being a tired, labored effort. Rather, I see it as being a new start, a new type of writing. And if only he'd carried on, we'd have seen what else would be like his new third phase of writing there as well.
Yes. I'll share this thought.
Go on.
With Tartar.
Yeah.
You mentioned Tartar. Just his ability to scale roofs and jump out of windows and slide down ropes because of his naval career.
Yes, yeah.
It makes me think that surely in the climax of the story, he was going to at some point be sailing down the side of Cloisterham Cathedral or something, or there was going to be something there where he got to be a hero. Maybe.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking of all those wonderful nautical dramas of the age, like Black-Eyed Susan and things. Or Colleen Bourne, we get these great acrobatics on stage of actors swinging across the stage and stuff and climbing over. And Tartar's very much in that vein of the melodramatic hero, who will swoop in at the end and save the day. Yeah, he's a fantastic character there too. And you're right, you can start to see signs of, well, maybe how is he going to save the day? What's he going to do there too? It's a shame the way the book ends. We only have half of it. We prioritize those characters who feature more in the first half. There's these characters towards the end, like Tartar, like the Billiken. You think, well, what would they have become? Would they have been as great characters, given the chance to really develop like the earlier characters have as well? We'll never know. Yeah.
I was interested on what you thought of Rosa as a character, because she's really extraordinary, isn't she? I mean, she made me in the early stages think of Dolly Varden.
Yeah.
But then you realise, and as Edwin finds out, there is a lot more to her. She's such a wonderful, rounded person. She's intelligent. She has emotional depth and intelligence that is completely overlooked.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first time you see Rosa, you don't actually see Rosa. You see her painting. So Jasper and Edwin are there, and it's unfinished. It's an unfinished picture, and that perfectly describes Rosa to me. It's the idea that there she is on the wall, that Edwin's looking on her as something he owns or will own. Jasper is looking upon it as something that he will want to ideally own as well. There's who owns it, the painter, the owner of it as well, that voyeurism there too. She is somebody who is frequently portrayed in a way of what they think she is. At the nun's house as well, they all think they know who Rosa is. Rosa doesn't know who Rosa is. She's a mystery to herself as well, and trying to work that out. So I think the temptation is to go, oh, she's quite a slight character. She's just a bit of a typical Dickens, hero, a bit flat as well. I don't see that. I see her as being a much more interesting character. Somebody who, like Dolly Varden, starts that way a bit. She's pettish, she can be quarrelsome, and a little bit spoiled as well. But you see her develop more than Edwin even, as she breaks off the engagement, as she moves to London, as she deals with those hardships that Neville wishes upon Edwin. We see her grow as a character and mature into a woman from a kind of initially what seems like a city girl as well. So I think she's a really interesting character of what we make of her. And again, we're jumping ahead here, but when we talk about the end of this book, yes, does Edwin die? Is he alive? Is Jasper the killer? Whatever. What about Rosa? Because we can almost be fairly sure she's going to marry, because that's what Dickens heroines do, right? But Forster says she'll marry Tartar. But people go, will it be Tartar? Will it be Neville? Will it be Jasper? Will it be Edwin alive and returned as well? Who is going to be Rosa's true love at the end of this too? And this will be a discussion for maybe our next podcast. But the idea of, what is Rosa's fate? Who do we presume Rosa to be? And how does that shape what we think her fate will be and who she should marry to? I think the fate of Rosa Budd is a far more interesting question than the fate of Edwin Drood. I think it says a lot more about us and how we see the character and what she is. Is she just like a silly girl? Is she a modern day woman? How do we interpret her? I think she's delightfully ambiguous, teasingly so perhaps as well, what we try to make of her as a character.
Yeah. That combination of sweet, pretty, girlish at the start.
Yeah.
But with all that depth as well. It's as if there are two Dickens women from two opposite points in his writing career combined in this one character.
Absolutely.
Maybe.
Yeah, and to what extent is the silliness just something that she puts on? What is that her mask, as well? And we do see this moment of seriousness beneath it as well, and her trying to articulate that and figure out who she is beneath it too. It is kind of deconstructing some of the classic Dickens heroines here, making a more interesting character there too.
Something that I thought might interest you, because I was doing my desperate word searches here, and they might not be 100% accurate, I should just say that. But I think the word murder in some form appears 19 times in this book. And I think the first occasion that it appears is used by Jasper, describing Neville's behaviour to Edwin as murderous.
Yeah.
So, again, I'm just wondering whether, there's something in there. There's something in there Dickens is trying to tell us. But I'm interested also, I don't know what you think about this, in what Jasper seems to do. The pieces that he seems to lay down on the track.
Yeah.
Like keeping a diary that he shows Crisparkle about how he feels about how his nephew's in danger and these little things. And what on earth is he doing up in the tower with Durdles? I loved that chapter.
Yeah.
That night with Durdles. It's so strange, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, because Dickens is doing that thing where he's writing in such a way that you're 99% certain what's happening. But, if you're 100% certain, it wouldn't be interesting. 99% is just enough to be confident, but you're just not entirely so. And it's frustrating. That makes you want to read on and confirm what you think is going on there as well. So there's this way it's talking about the Durdles goes and he feels sleepy and he dreams that Jasper comes back and takes the keys and walks away again. And they're going, he does, definitely. But you can't say for certain as well. It's sinister, the way that you see Jasper maneuvering around and just suggesting things to people. Neville has a murderous look, and planting those seeds of doubt in characters as he goes through. I worry about Neville and what he's going to do to my nephew as well. And there's no evidence against Neville, but Jasper's already set everyone against him before the crime even happens. So the horror there is that Jasper's a very intelligent character. And again, this is where Cloisterham becomes this terrifying town, because he's able to manipulate this small community and play upon their strengths and weaknesses, their idea of community, to go, there's the outsider, don't trust him. What's he doing as well? And he really exposes the dark underbelly of society. And that's the real horror of Jasper, not what's going on internally with him, but how he then uses that to expose the darker undercurrents of everyone else around him as well, and gets them on side of him too.
You mentioned Jasper's wine. That seems to be obviously mixed quite potently for Edwin and Neville to be at each other's throats. And then he brings the wine to the tower that night with Durdles, doesn't he, in the wicker bottle. That causes Durdles to basically be falling asleep on his feet and waking up again.
Yeah.
Do we assume that he's drugged?
We can only assume so, yeah. I mean, this is where you would have, in an adaptation, the slow, lingering camera shot on the glass where don't drink the wine, don't drink the wine. But Dickens does that in his narrative. He makes you suspect, and you're reading between the lines of what is happening here as well. And it's a very clever narrative where he never tells you what Jasper is thinking, but rather shows you what he's doing and leaves you to infer. And often he will show you what he's doing and describe it through the eyes of another character. Good old Jasper's come around to warn Crisparkle about Neville as well. Like, no, danger here as well. We don't trust him. And so showing from the offset this two sides of Jasper, it's that warning that we have as the reader that no one else in the book has. We have privileged information about Jasper that the other characters don't have, which means we trust him less than they do too. So we are looking for these clues that they're missing.
A moment I love is when Grugius, Rosa's guardian, goes to see Jasper and tells him that Edwin and Rosa have broken off their engagement, and what happens to Jasper's face, and how he goes into this spiral, this kind of crazed melodramatic spiral, and his face is described, I think, as leaden, but bubbling as if under heat or something, and that's an amazing loss of control there for Jasper, isn't it, that must surely come back to bite him if we assume the story is finished and has been completed.
It absolutely is. And what I love about that is it says, so Grugius tells them, actually, the marriage is broken off. So at that point, Jasper knows it's all been for nothing. And Grugius heard a terrible shriek saw no ghastly figure sitting or standing, saw nothing but a heap of torn and miry clothes upon the floor. So it just collapses. And then Grewgious is brutal because he says, not changing his action even then. He opened it to the palms of his hands, he warmed them and looked down at it. So Grewgious goes, oh, there's Jasper, he's collapsed in a heap. I'll just keep warming my hands by the fire here as well. Like the worst CPR in the world. It's like, do not have Grewgious there for first aid at any time. He's like, oh, look, he's collapsed. Interesting, and it's, what does that mean? The fact that Grewgious tells him this, sees Jasper collapse and does nothing, immediately he's already suspecting Jasper, and again, that's the way Dickens describes that. He simply describes what Grewgious does. He sees the body, carries on warming his hands by the fire. He doesn't say Grewgious suspects Jasper. He doesn't say Grewgious thinks it. He just says what Grewgious does, and we are left to infer what he's thinking. And that's what he does throughout the story. You're never really knowing what they're thinking. You're just left to kind of assume it and work it out for yourself.
Yeah, that's really well put. And I think what's so interesting is that we don't get to see all of Grewgious's arc, do we? Because at the very start, when he's first introduced to us, he's actually seen as a little bit of a comic character, possibly one that you can't take seriously or one that doesn't know anything. And yet he becomes a hero to Rosa when she flees to London, doesn't he? And
yeah, absolutely. He's a safe haven. Again, London is a safe haven. So she goes to Grewgious' house and that's where she can be safe. And then he's the one who kind of calls a council of Crisparkle and Tartar to work out what best to do for Rosa as well. So that becomes then your new den of operations for the heroes to retaliate. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because the half we have is charting Jasper working up towards the murder. There is a shift towards the end there as we see the response of everyone else. So now that the event has happened, we see the Grewgious and Crisparkle factions working out, how do we now respond to this? How do we save Neville? How do we entrap Jasper as well? We suspect him. How do we prove it's him as well? So it would have been an interesting second half had it come to see, would Jasper still be in the second half as much? What would he be up to as well? We get more opportunity, I think, for the other characters to react to that and be more proactive too.
Yeah. I've got a question about Dick Datchery for you.
Go on. Okay.
I mean, because the name Dick, is it Dickens himself coming into his story a little bit with his buff waistcoat and his shock of white hair and his slight eccentricity and feigning kind of, I'm just a buffer. I'm idle. I don't know.
You are not the first to think that. One of the completions does make the joke that actually Datchery is Dickens, and Dickens gone to report on the thing himself, So it's an autobiographical portrayal of himself there too. Dick Datchery, yeah, great character. And again, absolute enigma. And because we never really find out his identity, that's the tragedy, because I think I want to know who he is. I want to know, is he, Helena in disguise, or Edwin in disguise, or Bazard in disguise? Is he a new character as well? I'm really frustrated by that and not being able to flesh out Datchery's character properly and exactly who he's meant to be.
Yeah. I'm trying to do anagrams of Dick Datchery.
Yep.
And I think something like 9 out of the 12 letters of the name Dick Datchery fit with Charlie Dick.
Okay.
Don't know if we can get anything out of that. Conspiracy theories. Here
it always happens. Everyone starts reading Edwin Drood and goes, I won't fall for the same trap. I won't go down those rabbit holes. And next thing you know, you're there with the paper on the wall and the crayons.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
all the...
Have you done that? It must have happened to you while writing your book. You must have had to be restrained from thinking about it too much.
Really, really did. Yeah, a couple of times I thought, oh, that's interesting. No, that way, man, a slide step away from that. Yeah, it's... Trying to solve Edwin Drood, I tell you, it's a dangerous and slippery path. It's a fun one, but you've got to know when to step back, and then walk away from it. Yeah,
absolutely. I could tell you 2 words I've written down here. I've got sex, and race.
Yes.
I mean, I think as in sexual desire, I feel like this one has. I see a lot of that in this book in ways that I don't always see it in other Dickens.
Yeah, so I mean, again, the immediate precedent for Jasper is Bradley Headstone in Our Mutual Friend. So you've got that archetype there of the dark pursuing figure. You mentioned Datchery as Dickens. A lot of people have seen Jasper as Dickens, as a dark autobiographical painting of himself, the obsessive compulsive character with this younger woman he's pursuing as well. And this is quite fanciful to think that he might be doing this. If he is he doing it consciously, subconsciously? like all authors, he's going to pull into himself to bring out characters, but it is interesting to see Jasper as potentially Dickens indulging his dark side and imagining that kind of fantasy of being that pursuing figure there too. So yeah, there's a lot of desire and repression too. That's the point. I mean, Jasper can't just say to Rosa, "May I court you?" She's dating his nephew, who then becomes a potential murder victim as well. It's never appropriate for him to do that. And the way that repression makes it worse for him, makes the desire stronger, that it is denied. Therefore, he only yearns for her more as well. So uncontrollable desire, denied desire as well, certainly comes through there passionately. And yeah, you've got that slight friction when you got, the Landless twins arrive and Edwin's like, "Oh, Helena's nice." And, and Neville's like, "Oh, Rose is nice." And they're all kind of very much quite flirty as well and looking at each other too. A lot of cross paths there as we go through. The race card is really interesting, I think, with Edwin Drood. So I've mentioned a few times the general background of the Orient and the exotic, Edwin going to Egypt, the world coming to Sapsi via all the antiques, the Landless twins, obviously the Landless twins coming from abroad as well, and that idea of Britain meeting its own empire and it coming back to it and confronting it as well. So one of the questions is, are the Landless twins, what is their ethnicity? Are they white? Are they not? Again, we assume it's Dickens, of course, all the characters are white, but we don't know that. They're referred to as being dark in complexion.
Yes, dark enough for Sapsi not to trust Neville at all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mr. Sapsi is by no means friendly towards the inflammable young spark. He says that his complexion is un-English. And when Mr. Sapsi has once declared anything to be un-English, he considers that thing everlastingly sunk in the bottomless pit.
And there's a lot of talk about their tigerish blood they've inherited from being raised abroad as well. So it's quite ambiguous. The illustrations definitely have cross-hatching on their skin to make them look darker as well. So when the BBC adapted it, they had Asian characters cast in the roles as well. So they did play them as non-Caucasian, which is interesting, because then they're the first major non-Caucasian characters in Dickens, ultimately, which would be huge. They epitomize the outsider and the plight of the outsider. They come from abroad, they're immigrants. They come in, and they're treated with suspicion. They're treated with initially charity, but the idea of be grateful for what we're doing for you. And you're right, they are friendlier and more open than a lot of the characters who presume them to be better than them too. So there's a real interesting discussion going on in this story that Dickens is bringing in of how high and mighty we can be, perhaps, and questioning that, and looking at what does the other world have to offer to us here.
Yes. You can't pin Dickens down 100%, and if anything, he writes very feelingly about them, doesn't he, in a way that's sympathetic.
They are sympathetic because they ultimately we're sure that Neville's innocent and he is unfairly tried by public opinion. So in that sense, they are sympathetic. Equally, there are some moments where you're like, wouldn't have phrased it in that way necessarily, So talking about this tigerish blood inside them and the dark looks that they have, you're like, what do you mean by that exactly, Charles? What does that occur? So there's a clumsiness there, I would say, perhaps, of a 19th century author trying to write about race. But I think the intention is there, to show them as ultimately good people.
Yep. I would agree with that, but it does feel like it's pushing forward in the right direction, doesn't it? Even if the starting point is in that. The worst moment, I thought, if we're going to look at that, is the moment in the very first chapter where he describes Princess Puffer. We don't know who she is yet, but talks about something like he notices that the woman has opium smoked herself into a strange likeness of the Chinaman. His form of cheek, eye, and temple, and his colour are repeated in her.
Yeah, it's
that's the expression of a Chinese face looking stoned, basically.
Yeah, it is. It's not great, is it?
Have you come across this with students or having to teach this, or where do you go with that?
It's a really difficult thing to do because ultimately, when you look at any writer of the past, there are going to be ideas there that are of the time that are not of our time. And so you have to look at these things. Well, I wish he hadn't said that. I wish he hadn't said that too. It is like having, your racist uncle at the table. Like we don't say that anymore. We don't say that anymore, Charles. Don't say that. And so moments like this, I mean, the opium den, generally talking about, the Chinaman there and the Lascar. One of the issues there, these stereotypes, I say this with all due caution, but at the time Dickens is writing, there were quarters of town, like that's the Chinese quarter, and there wasn't that mixing in the same way. So yes, it was a multinational society, but there were definite factions in there and ways of depicting them as, right? The Chinese are the ones bringing over the opium, that kind of thing there too. Where we go, no, that's not true. It's like, well, actually, it kind of is for the time he's writing as well, So this dangerous territory of it. It's a difficult one to try to depict that of what is Dickens reporting on the racism of the time in a matter-of-fact way, and is he just simply repeating what others are saying around him? And if so, is that okay? Is that racist or not? Or what is Dickens pointedly making comments that are over and above the views of his time? In Drood, not so much. Princess Puffer's likeness to Chinaman aside, there's not so much of that. Some of the other works, we get moments that are more troubling there too.
That's so great, Pete. Thank you. Because it can only be brought up at another point if it's not talked about, if it's not looked at, But something else in that first chapter, that just very quickly on Macbeth again, did you notice the phantom dagger? Thinking air-drawn daggers from Macbeth. Lascar tries to pull a dagger. There's no dagger there because Princess Puffer's taken it off him.
Is it a dagger I see before me? It's
exactly.
Not. Exactly, yeah.
The air-drawn dagger that led you to Duncan. My mind has gone crazy over Macbeth in this, so I've been so restrained, but I just wanted to throw that in. I thought possibly to finish, there's this one delightful random passage that I thought you might remember and like, which is old Mrs. Crisparkle's closet.
Yes. This wonderful cabinet full of all these curiosities.
And it's a fugue. He describes it as a fugue, and it has a portrait of Handel above it. I mean, what an extraordinary, delightful thing that doesn't show a mind shutting down and losing its edge, does it?
Not at all, no.
It was a most wonderful closet. Above it, a portrait of Handel in a flowing wig beamed down at the spectator, with a knowing air of being up to the contents of the closet, and a musical air of intending to combine all its harmonies in one delicious fugue. Deep shells of pickle jars, jam pots, tin canisters, spice boxes, and agreeably outlandish vessels of blue and white, the luscious lodgings of preserved tamarinds and ginger. The pickles, in a uniform of rich brown double-breasted buttoned coat, and yellow or sombre drab continuations, announced their portly forms in printed capitals as walnut, gherkin, onion, cabbage, cauliflower, mixed, and other members of that noble family. There was a crowning air upon this closet of closets, of having been for ages hummed through by the cathedral bell and organ, until those venerable bees had made sublimated honey of everything in store.
It's Dickens doing what Dickens does best, which he's writing about the domestic space and really pulling out the universe within the house. Here's a closet, but look what's going on here. What it tells about the character, about the person as well. It's you're right. It's beautifully detailed and yet has no relevance to the story whatsoever. It's not a clue. There's no poison in there or anything to us to go, aha, that's what it means. It's just Dickens taking the time to really lay out the scene and detail it and tell us about character through the objects of their house and their surroundings as well. What you didn't mention, which I thought you were going to mention on the Macbeth thing, was the waiter with the leg, like Macbeth.
Yeah. It's blatant, isn't it? When he's dragging it behind him with guilt.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. So this is the waiter serving, I think it's Edwin and Grewgious he serves, and there's the waiter comes over to bring the food from, and as he leaves, the last thing you see is his leg leaving like Macbeth on the stage. And it's great because first of all, it's a comic reference to Macbeth, which we love comic references. We love, it can't all be doom and gloom. But also specifically, it's a reference not to Shakespeare's play, but to the way it's done on stage at the time.
Yes.
So one of the questions about Dickens and Shakespeare is Dickens reading Shakespeare? Is Dickens watching Shakespeare? What's the difference? So there's moments of the language coming through. That's the real engagement with the text there. Those quotes that come through there as well. Could be either reading or on stage. But moments like this with the waiter, he's really talking about it as a theatrical experience here too. But those moments, that and when shall these two meet again, they are so explicit, that you're primed to go, Macbeth is here. I mean, and later on he talks about Chris Sparkle goes for a swim in the weir where he finds the watch and the shirt pin and talks about the water being like Lady Macbeth, as she tries to part two. So again, you've got three explicit references to Macbeth are enough for you to therefore see the other references as not accidental either. It's running through his mind here, keeps pulling back on it again and again. It's a modern day Macbeth he's writing here in the story. And it's a really interesting lens to see the story through because of what it offers for Jasper's character as a Macbeth figure, but also for that kind of gothic tone it lends to the story as well. This idea of this sort of supernatural state and bad things happening and so forth too. Foul is fair and fair is foul. It really encapsulates that unsettling feeling close to him, this supposedly friendly town that ultimately is a scene for murder. We assume, if only we knew, but we assume. Yeah,
absolutely. I think my last Macbeth point was that I think Durdles is the porter.
Yes, absolutely.
With the keys and everything, yeah.
The keys as well, and upon the murder scene, absolutely, yeah. And that same kind of dark comic humor, really, this is a guy who spends his whole time creating tombs, and he's got that kind of graveyard humor about it. Yeah, definitely.
Pete, this has been so enjoyable. Thank you so much. And I cannot wait for part 2 when we can let rip about
all the theories.
The theories, your theories, everybody else's theory about what on earth happens after Dick Datchery has fallen to with his appetite, or whatever that last line is.
Absolutely that, yeah. Perfect. I look forward to it, Dominic. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Charles Dickens' A Brain on Fire. If you're enjoying these episodes and would like to make a small donation towards the costs of producing them, please follow the link at the bottom of the description and you can make a donation there. Every coffee you buy makes a huge difference. Thank you ever so much, and see you next time.